So we'll start off with the final keyword today. Okay. See, last class I had given you some notes on final keyword. There's some few modifications I told you. Understood? There are some few modifications I told you. The modification would be what you wrote on the above, that is class method is correct. But what you have written for variables, there is slight change that you have to write again. Means a little you have to modify. See, this is correct. Final is a keyword in Java. You have written it. Final is a keyword in Java. Final stops. All this you have written. But for variable, I have added some extra points now. These extra points you have to write actually. So what are the extra points? I mean, same thing. See this. Only few points I have added. Okay. So these few points you can add extra. But I start teaching you final keyword now. So final keyword is the topic today. Okay. So what is final now? First of all, see, final is basically classified as a keyword. Final is a basically classified as keyword. The next it is a modifier. They call it as a modifier. Why they call it as modifier? We'll see. Okay. Now see in the classification, if you see keywords, it has been classified under what? Modifier. It has been classified under modifier. Fine then. So this keyword can be used with three things. What all it can be used? It can be used with a class, it can be used with a method, and it can be used with a variable. If you use final keyword with the class, it stops modification of the class. If you use final keyword with the method, it stops modification of the method. If I use a final keyword with a variable, it stops modification of the variable. So final is a keyword which is used for stopping modifications. And you can stop the modification of three things. Understood? You can stop the modification of three things. What are the three things? Class, method, variable. So first I'll start with class. Then I'll go with method. Then I'll go with variable. So I'll be showing you how to use final with a class now. Class A. So you'll be having a class and you can have some members, void M1, void M2. You can write some logic inside this. That's your wish. SOP inside something you can write. So I'm taking the first one, which is class. I'm showing you final with the help of class. See now, sometimes when we write a class now, we do not want our class to be modified. Generally a class can be modified. But how do you modify a class? Not this class. You'll write a subclass and modify. So sometimes we don't want our class to be modified. If you want to stop modification of a class, see, this is how you modify now. Class B extends A. I can override M1, correct? But overriding is nothing but what? Modification. You're modifying that now. I can add on variable int Z. That's nothing but what? Modification. I can add on extra method void M3. So here you are overriding. Here you are adding variable. But all this is leading into what? Modification. Instead of writing the extra members in this class, you are writing it in subclass so that when you create the subclass object, all the members will come into existence. But that is nothing but technically if you see modification of the class. Okay. This is adding extra method. If you don't want adding extra method, so if you don't want your class to be modified, you can make this as class as final. So final is a keyword which can be used with the class now. If you make your class as final, now it stops modification. But exactly what happens internally is, it stops modification we know. But if you use final with the keyword, it stops inheritance. If you use final keyword with the class, it stops inheritance. So final keyword can be used for stopping inheritance of a class. It stops inheritance of a class. Understood now? See, generally in all books you study, final keyword when it is used with the class, it stops inheritance. That is correct. Final keyword when it is used with the class, it stops inheritance, it's correct. But why do you do that? To stop modification of a class. That is correct. But the extra point you have to tell this also. Are you clear this? So this becomes error now. What is error? A class cannot be inherited. Here error is class A cannot be inherited. So when you can't inherit, there is no question of modifying. Are you clear? Okay, but see, before you make your class as final, you think twice. Okay, because once it is final, nobody else can modify it. And we know the rules of OOPS design. OOPS design clearly tells a class should be closed for modification but open for extension. You know now what a big serious design we are challenging. Understood? You are challenging a very powerful design now. Understood? Means you should not be do this only when it is really required. If you do it, now your class is not able to be modified. Understood? Only under serious conditions we do this, not always. Okay, you should not always make your class as final. You should leave it for you should leave the class for getting modified. It should be open for extension. It should be open for extension, but only under some serious conditions we take this decision. Understood? So under which condition you take the decision? Think twice. If you are taking this, think twice before you do this. But some of the classes built in the Lang package, some of the classes built in the some of the built-in classes. I keep telling you, libraries are there, libraries are there. I keep telling you, built-in classes. Okay, the built-in classes are nothing but what? Library. Most of the classes in the library are final. Like example is some of the classes you know. One is called as the string class. See, string is a final class in Java. It's a built-in class. You can see live. So string buffer. So when we start working with built-in classes, you will understand this. String buffer is a final class. String is a final class. Then system is a final class. Means you can never extend these classes. I cannot write the code. Class A extends system, error. Class A extends string, error. You know why? They don't want their code to be modified. These are some of the good examples where you can see the class made as final. Understood? But when we start coding projects, we'll be coding projects. When you're coding projects, obviously in your projects you'll be writing class, subclass, all that data types you'll be using. So that time you be careful. When you're coding projects, in your projects, be careful to whether to make your class as final or not final. Understood? But once it is made final, it cannot be inherited. Are you clear with this? So I'll complete off method also. Second one, final with method. See, sometimes you want your, are you clear with the class, final with class? Okay. So next thing is you can use final with what? Methods. See, sometimes you will be having a class. You want some functionality to be inherited. There will be a requirement. You want some functionality to be inherited, but you want something not to be modified. You do not want something to be modified. So that is when is, see, I want M1 to be inherited, or let's take I want M2 to be inherited. I want M2 to be inherited into class B, but I don't want M1 to be modified. So that time also what you can do? Make this method as final. Now when class B extends A, understood? You can never modify M1. Modify means what? Override. You cannot modify M1 method means you cannot override M1 method. So this is possible. You can extend now. Earlier their class cannot be inherited, but here class can be inherited. Here class can be inherited. It's possible. Understood? So class can be inherited and it is possible, but you cannot override. This is error. But if you want, you can add extra members. That is your wish. Void M3. Okay, and if you want, you can override M2. But thing is, you cannot override M1 method. So if you use final with a method, you cannot override. Generally they say what? If you use final with a method, you cannot override. Yes, that's correct. But other way of looking at final with a method is what? It stops modification of a method. Clear these two now? So I'll just type and show you these two. So then we'll continue with the variables. Are you clear with these two things? See, that's what has been mentioned in the document. Final is a keyword in Java. Final stops modification of a class, method and variable. Okay, so we are looking at class and method right now. Variable we'll see next. See, final keyword can be used with the following three things: class, method and variables. Variables next. Class. Now see with the class. If a class is declared as final, it cannot be inherited or it stops inheritance. Final prevents modification of a class, other way of saying it. One more thing, okay, means if you make a class as final, it cannot be inherited, correct, but generally when do you do it? To stop modification. Same thing, if a method is declared as final, it cannot be overridden, correct, but why do you do it? To stop modification. Final prevents modification of a method also, clear? So we'll see with this example. I'll give the class name as final class and method demo. You can give any name. See this, there's a class called as A. Fine. You know you can write an empty class now. See, I'll cut this. You know, see there's nothing, there's only one class now. If you want you can compile, it compiles. A dot class will be generated. If you want you can see. See, A dot class has been generated. Clear? So in your file how many classes are there, those dot class will be generated. Anyway, see this. This itself you can see. Class B extends A is valid now. It compiles. And by chance if I make my class as final, this gives you error. Starts off here only. It is actually not allowing you to override. Understood? Anyway, there are no members. That is secondary. There are no members. But once a class is made as final, it cannot be inherited. See this. I'll start adding the members now. Void M1. I'll just write the main method. Let it be, okay, there. See now class B is extending here. It can extend and modify it now. Yes or no? How it will modify? See, it can extend and override, it can add extra method, all that it can do inside BM1. So this is nothing but what? Overriding is nothing but modification. But I don't want my class only to be modified. Understood? So that is when what we do? We make the class as final. Okay. So now it will not allow you to compile. Understood? So if I remove final, it allows the class can be modified. Modification means anything you can do, not only overriding. You can add extra variable, you can add extra method, you can override, you can modify it. Okay. Generally, why do you write a subclass? To modify the existing class. How do you modify the existing class? By inheriting the existing functionality and adding or changing the functionality you require. That's how do you do modification of a class? You inherit the functionality of a class and then add or change the functionality of the existing class. So that is getting avoided now. So are you clear with this? Understood? Final with which one? Class? Okay. See now I don't want my method to be overridden. So I can say final. So what happens now? M1 cannot be overridden. If I don't make it as final, what happens? You can override. See this. You can override and see this. If I want, I'll create the object. See which method is getting executed now? M1 from B. But I don't want that to be executed. Means I don't want that to be modified. So that's when you can make this as final. But if you make M1 as final, which can be modified? M2 can be modified. M2 can be modified. Clear? So if I want, I can modify M2, but I cannot modify M1. So M1 cannot be modified. So M2 can be overridden. See now inside B, M2. Anyway, M1 from A only is getting executed. If you want, you can check with M2. Clear? M2 from B early gets executed. Are you clear with this two final? This is possible. Okay. This stops overriding. If I use it with the class, it stops. Say final with class A stops inheritance. Final with method stops what? Overriding. Decide what you want to do. Both options have been provided to you. Are you clear this? Okay. But one more thing. Now see, if a method is final, okay, final methods are inherited. Remember that. Final methods are inherited, but they cannot be overridden. Final methods are inherited, but they cannot be overridden. Now what do you mean by that? Okay, they are inherited. Okay, see, generally I told you on previous thing, what I told you, what you can inherit, you can override. What all things you can inherit, you can override. But now I am telling what? It is inherited, but cannot be overridden. Final methods are inherited, but cannot be overridden. Cannot be overridden, you saw. But you want to know what is inheritance. See, B dot M1. Check with B dot M1. BB is equal to new B dot M1. So when I create the subclass object, when I create the subclass object, what happens? I am calling M1. I have created which object? B object. But when I create the subclass object, M1 method is getting executed from where? Superclass. That clearly shows that the final methods are inherited, but they cannot be overridden. Are you clear with all this? Yeah? Okay. Any questions here? Okay, I had explained you overriding with three things. Means private methods cannot be overridden. Correct? Static methods cannot be overridden. Final methods cannot be overridden. Yes or no? See, private methods cannot be overridden because they are not inherited. They are not. See, why you can't override? Why you can't override private methods, static methods and final methods? See, they are not inherited. Understood? Then next, static. They are bound with class or they belong to class. You have seen that now? If you want to understand this, you have to use dynamic polymorphism. A is equal to new B. If you are having M1 in class A and M1 in class B and both are static, A is equal to new B, A dot M1 executes from superclass. Understood? You remove static, it will execute from subclass. So static methods cannot be overridden. Final methods stops overriding. Yes or no? Final is actually stopping. Why you can't override final method? Because it stops overriding. You should know the reasons. Understood? Are you clear with these three things? But final methods are inherited, remember. They cannot be overridden. They are inherited, but final methods are inherited but cannot be overridden. Are you clear with this? Any questions with class and method? Okay, so I'll move to variables now. Final with variables. See, final with variables is a big topic. These are the notes for final with variables. What you have to understand of is final keyword can be used with two type of variables. One is with primitive variable, other one is with reference variables. Okay, so if you understand the primitive variable properly, then you'll understand the reference variable properly. So always remember, you are strong with the basics, that is primitive data types. The more powerfully you can work with user defined types. Understood? So let's see. First I'll show you final with primitive variables, then I'll show you with reference variables. Are you clear? So this I'll explain you later. So we'll be seeing final with variables now. Final with variables. See, which are the two types of variables? Primitive and reference. These are the two types of variables. Both these variables can be made as final. But again, what are the different kinds of variables you can declare? What are the different kinds of variables you can declare? Yes. See, you can have a static variable. Then you can have instance variables. Then you can have local variables. Then you can have parameters. So even if you are having primitive variable, the primitive variable can be used as what? This four kind. Understood? Even if you have a reference variable, you can have it as what? Static variable, instance variable, local variable, and parameter. So first I will be covering primitive variables. Final with primitive variables. One by one, I'll start off. Clear? First I will cover final with primitive variables. In primitive variables, say class A. I'm using int I here. So I'm using int I. First I'll go with instance variables only. Then I'll explain you static variables. Then I'll go with local variables. Then parameters. So I'm using see the combination you understood now. We are learning final variables. Final has to be learned with two kinds of variables, primitive and reference. But again, primitive can be used as what? Static, instance, local, and parameters. So I'll be teaching you primitive with instance variables first. See this. So now you're having class, or I'll take static first, it will be much better. No, instance only will go. First we'll go with instance. See, there's a class A. Okay. Till now, what are the different ways you can initialize an instance variable? Hard coding. We'll make final later, but till now we have learned how do you initialize the final variable? Hard coding, dot operator, constructor or method. These are the four ways you can initialize the. I'll clear this now. Till now we have learned it can be initialized in four ways. Okay, but before we start off learning final, understand this point also first. If you use final, okay, final variables, look at the behavior of final variables, the behavior of final variables, how they are designed. Behavior of final variables. First thing, what they are designed is, it can be initialized one and only once. Only once, that's it. Your final variables can be initialized only once. Second thing, once initialized, they can't be modified or reinitialized. Modification here means reinitialization. Third thing, there is a restricted way of initializing. You cannot initialize it however you want. Restricted way of initializing means you cannot initialize the final variable whenever you want, wherever you want. There is a restricted way. Last thing, final variables do not have default values. See, non-final variables have default values. Yes or no? Non-final. Till now we have worked with non-final only. Your instance variables was having default value. The static variable was having default value. Correct now? So similarly, okay, but here final variables do not have default values. If you understand these four things correctly, now final variables becomes very simple now. Let's see this. See, final variables can be initialized only once. First I'll teach you that. So now I'm having an instance variable. Okay, now what I'll do, till now, what are the different ways you can initialize it? Hard coding. Or if I don't hard code an instance variable, it's non-final variable. It's non-final. Okay, one way is hard coding. Otherwise what? Class demo, you can create an object, PSVM, and say A is equal to new A, an object of A will be created. I can give the value, A dot I is equal to 10. This is one more way you can initialize. Okay, third way, how you can initialize is with the help of a constructor. This way also you can initialize. If it is a non-final variable, see how many options you are having. Another way what you can initialize is through a method. So these are the four options you are having. What are the four options you are having? One with hard coding or assigning a value. Assigning at the time of declaration. Assign at the time of declaration. Non-final, I am telling, non-final, which is not final. Other way is, second approach is access and initialize with dot operator. Third approach is constructor. Fourth approach is you can initialize the instance non-final variable with so many ways are there. Whichever one you want you do, but most we give preference to constructor. Maximum we give preference to constructor. Okay, this is non-final. But if I make my variable as final now, if I make my method as final, yes, all these four things have to be studied now. All these four things you have to study. What it is? It can be initialized only once. Okay, means see, I can initialize it only once. Shall I remove all this now? Yeah, see now I can initialize it here. I is equal to 10. That's it. I'll remove everything now. Okay. So once you initialize it there, finished. Don't go with methods and all now. Leave this. I'm initializing with, here what is the one way I'm initializing? Assign at the time of declaration. That is hard coding. Yeah, this is valid. So it can be initialized only once. Okay. And once initialized it can be modified. And restricted way of initializing. Restricted means what? You can initialize it there. Let's see where and all you can initialize. Understood? Hard coding is correct. A is equal to new A, SOP, A dot I, valid. Understood? But this way of initializing, which one? The second one what you saw just now will not be allowed. Which one? A is equal to new A dot I is equal to 10 is not allowed. There's a restricted way of initializing. You can initialize like that, but you cannot initialize with dot operator. Next, other way of initializing. You can assign, you can initialize like this. Second way you can initialize it through a constructor. See, this is not correct. This is wrong. This is error. One is you can initialize here. This is correct. Okay. Second way you can initialize this with help of, in constructor you can initialize, no issue. You can initialize it in constructor. One more place you can initialize the instance variable is in a instance block. This is also valid. I is equal to 10. Yes, this is valid. You can initialize with instance block. These are the only three places where you can initialize what? A final variable. These are only three places. One is here, second one is constructor, third one is block, where you want to initialize. But you cannot initialize in method. This is wrong now. Void m1 int x. So you can't initialize the final variable like this. This is wrong. With methods, wrong. This is correct. This is correct. This is correct. This is also wrong. Understood? These are the only place you can. There is restricted way of initializing. You cannot initialize it wherever you want. Understood? So either here in the declaration or in the constructor or in the method. Okay. Now what happens if I initialize it in the next thing? You understood what is the restricted way of initializing? Next. It can be initialized only once. We'll come to this topic now. See, supposing I initialize it here. Later on I cannot overwrite the value. Means I'll hard code it here, but again I can't initialize it in the constructor. It gives me error. Two places I can't do. Either I have to do it here, declare the variable here once, initialize it here. Understood? Now what happens? See, when the object of A is created, first I comes into existence. First I comes into existence. After it is coming into, see, when you create the object A is equal to new A, memory gets allocated, I, it is declared. Okay. But when the constructor gets executed, now I will be initialized if I send the value. Means if you don't hard code there, it can be initialized in the constructor. Or it means as soon as the class is loaded, first I will come be declared and initialized. But when it is declared now, this time it will not be initialized. But after the constructor completes execution, it will be initialized. Afterwards I cannot modify. Once it is initialized, we cannot modify it. One more way, if you want, you can initialize it in the instance block also. But in all objects it will have the same value. If you initialize it in the constructor like that, in one object you can have what? One value. But it is not able to be modified. See, in A1 it will be what now? 10. If you want, you can say A2 is equal to new A, and I give a value of 20. So fine, when the A2 object gets created, what is the value of I here? 20. So if you use the constructor in one object, you can give one variable. One object you can give one value. Understood? But if you code in the instance block, it is hard coded because you cannot send arguments. So since you cannot send arguments, it will be having a fixed value. Can you send arguments to a block? So you cannot send. So it will always have, in all the objects, it will have the same value of 10. But once initialized, it cannot be overwritten. You try to override it anywhere. See, supposing I initialize it here. See what will be the flow now. We'll go with instance variable first is equal to 1. So in the object of A is created, first I is declared and initialized to 1 this time. Then when the constructor gets executed, it will be overwritten with 10 now. So here overwriting will happen, but that case will not be happening for what? A final variable. When the instance is created, okay, instance variables will come into instance and they'll have the value, either default value or whatever assigned. But once the constructor completes execution, they can be modified. Or if you call the method, it can be modified. But that is not the case with final variables. Final variables are initialized only once. Where you want to initialize, you do it. But for instance variable, only 3 places. Clear this topic now? Instance variables. So be careful with instance variables because most of the times you'll be making your variables as final. Are you clear? Shall I type and show you this? Final variables. See, work with primitives. After I work with primitives, I'll use what? Reference variables here. That also I'll type and show you. So be careful. In reference variables, how it works, you should know now. So it cannot be, value cannot be modified. Shall I clear all this now? And few doubts you might get here and there. It's better you can type it and check it out. For any final variables, these 4 rules are applicable. For any final variable. So you know how to work with this instance variable. This I'll not go ahead. Directly I'll make my variable as final. See, one more thing about final is, final variables do not have default values. They never have a default value. See, I'll try to compile. There's nothing wrong in class A. What is wrong in class A? Perfect it is. Okay, if you want, I'll compile. See this, without final. It will compile and it will generate what? A.class. A.class has been generated. See there. Understood? So, but if I make my variable as final, see, final variables cannot have default values. It forces you to initialize it. See this. It forces you. Now, where you initialize, that you decide, because it's restricted. For initializing instance variable, there are only 3 places. One is hard coding, second one is constructor, third one is method. Other than these 3 instance blocks, okay, you can initialize it in declaring or in constructor or in instance block. Okay, other than these 3 locations, you cannot initialize it anywhere. First understand that. So here I'll do it with hard coding. First one. This is one way you can initialize a final variable. But once you create the object, you can print the values also. See, now in all objects, I will be having the same value. Notice that. In A1 also the value is same, A2 also the value is same. Clear? But it is hard coded. See, other way of initializing this is what? If you don't initialize it here, the second location where you can initialize it is in a instance block. You can initialize it here also. I is equal to 5 I will give. This is valid. This is an instance block now. So in both the objects, it is 5. Okay. But see, one more thing. If I initialize it here is equal to 8. Again, I cannot initialize it here. final variable can be initialized only once and cannot be modified. See, it can be initialized once, but where you will initialize, that you decide. See, now for when I compile it, for 5 it is giving error, not for 8, because here it is initialized first, and again you are trying to modify it in the block. This it will not allow. So it can be initialized only once. So where you want to do it, that you decide. Understood? So another way of initializing it, see, this is also correct. You can initialize it in the block. Another way of initializing it is in the constructor. You can go with the same variable or a different variable name, parameter, that you decide. So this dot I is equal to I, valid. Again, two places you can't do it, give me error. Sorry, this dot I is equal to I, semicolon. This will give me, okay, now we have to send the value here, constructor value. So what is the advantage here if I do it like this? Now both objects will have different values. Both objects will have different values. Okay, but again it will give me error. Reason is I am trying to initialize it twice. See, I cannot be assigned, cannot assign a value to final variable I, because you already assigned it here. So that's why you can remove this. So see, I got only 3 chances, either hard coding or block, instance block or constructor. Where you want to decide it. But once it is done, see, in every object it is different. Okay, so you can initialize it in 3 places. But what if I try to initialize it in a method? It will not allow you. See, in methods it will not allow you. Void m1 int x. I am trying to initialize it where? In an instance method only, but it will not allow me. Final variables cannot be initialized where? Okay, now I have to remove the constructor. I have to remove, no? Sorry. No, see, I have to call the default constructor now, and then I have to call the method also. A1 dot m1 of 10. A2 is equal to new A2. A2 dot m1 of 20. Correct? Yeah, semicolon. Over. Clear this. But I cannot initialize the final variables with methods, or I cannot initialize it with what? Dot operator also. See, this is not possible. Again, what is not possible? A1 dot I is equal to 10. This is also not possible. These are restricted ways. You cannot initialize it. A2 dot I is equal to 20. This is also restricted. You cannot initialize with dot operator. Cannot assign a value to final variable I. I is equal to x. Here also it is giving error in method. We'll comment the method. Final variable only declared, but I'm trying to initialize with dot operator. So all this you have to check out like this. Do R&D one by one, and check it out. One error it is telling in class you are not initialized it. Second error what it is saying is you are trying to initialize with dot operator, which is not possible. 3 errors it will give you. So if you want to resolve all this, you just give the value here. And don't try to give it here. Once it is given, can it be modified? Here you are trying to modify this time. This is not possible. Are you clear? So now it will work. Understood? So what are the 3 places you can give the value? One is, yeah, this is correct. First one, hard coding, correct. Correct. Second one is in instance block, correct. You can give it. Second approach. Third approach where you can do is in constructor. These are the only 3 places. So where you cannot do, you write, because I cannot write here. Yes, you cannot do it in method, but you cannot in method. Fourth one, sorry, one cannot in method, means you cannot initialize a final variable in method. You cannot initialize where? Dot operator. Cannot with dot operator. Correct, na? Cannot. Are you clear with this? Any questions here with final instance variables?
So when I added the default constructor over there, sir, it was looking for default constructor to initialize the value, sir, and it was not looking for parameterized constructor to initialize the value. And when I initialize the value in default constructor,
Stop. Listen, see. These are all silly errors. I want to initialize with what? Hard coding only. Will this work now? 100% it will work. Why? Because I am calling default constructor. Okay. But by chance, if I make my variable as final, I do initialization like this. If I initialize, okay, this also will work, but this time I have to call what? Argumented constructor. Compulsory I have to call. You know how to call the constructors, man? This is also valid. Understood? But by chance, I will hard code. I'll hard code. And I'll try to call default constructor. It is not there now. Is your error? Is your error?
No, sir.
Huh?
At the same time, I add a default constructor over there.
You want to add default constructor.
Now it was looking for that default constructor.
Before that, what is the error?
I might not have been initialized in default constructor.
No. You want to remove I here?
Yes, sir.
I'll remove?
Yes, sir.
I'll remove or keep it?
Remove, sir.
Then what is the error? You tell.
I might not have been initialized in default constructor.
Yes, sir. You have to initialize it. You are not initializing only, no?
I'm calling constructor as parameterized constructor.
You are calling parameterized?
Constructor. I am initializing it in parameterized constructor.
Or you are calling it here? Yeah. Why you get error, you know? It will give error. Variable might not have initialized. In every constructor you have to initialize it. In every constructor, because you don't know which constructor will be called now. I am calling which one with parameter this time. Sometimes I might create an object by calling without parameter also, no? So that time it will remain what? Uninitialized. See here, if you are creating an object like this, fine. But I will create A2 object without what? By using the default constructor. In A2 object, what will be the value of I? Understood? So in every constructor you have to initialize the final variable. Every constructor, not one. Understood? So but here in default constructor you have to hard code. Because you are not sending a value, no? That is your wish. How will you give the value? But final variable has to be, if you are initializing final variable in a constructor, it has to be initialized in every constructor. Understood? If you are initializing a final variable in a constructor, it has to be, how many constructors you have? In all those constructors you have to initialize it. Clear? Because you understood the problem now. If I create the A2 object without using the parameterized constructor, I am creating A2 object by using what? Default constructor. So when the A2 object is created, it will call for this constructor. Which one? The second constructor. But what is the value of I in that A2 object? You are neither initializing it by hard coding, nor you are initializing it in the default constructor. That's the problem. Now this will work. So in A1 it will be what? 10. In A2 it will be what? 5. Perfect. Understood? These are your interview, which one? SCJP questions. These are only your SCJP questions. Clear this? Then, okay, we'll go with static variables now. Understood? We'll go with static variables. Work hard with primitive because reference variables become easy to you. You don't struggle in learning what? Reference variables. Struggle more in primitive variables so that when you use reference variables they become easy. Okay, so I'll go with which one now? Static variables. Okay, one more thing I forgot to tell you. Supposingly, by chance, see, you can initialize the variable in which location? Either with hard coding or in the constructor or in the block. Okay, here, okay. You can initialize it here, or you can initialize it in the block, or you can initialize it in constructor. Fine. But by chance, if I am not initializing while declaring, if I am not initializing the variable while declaring here in the first line, okay, these variables are called as blank final variables. These variables are called as blank final variables. Now what do you mean by a blank final variable? If the variable is not initialized during declaration, it's called as blank final variable. If your variable is not initialized during declaration, it is called as blank final variable. Understood? So blank final variables, where will you initialize? Blank final instance variables, where will you initialize? Either in the constructor or in the instance block. Blank final variables have to be initialized either in the instance block or in the constructor. Simple as that. Clear? That's one technical word they are using. If you do not initialize the variable while declaring, it's called as blank variable. Clear? Fine. Now we'll go with static variables now. I showed you primitive with instance, correct? Primitive with instance. Now I'll show you primitive with static. Class A, int I. Okay, 1 second. So this is static int I now. Now when do static variables come to existence? Class is loaded. And when can we initialize the static variables? You know, you can generally we initialize static, even though there are many approaches, we initialize static variables with hard coding or in static block. These are the only two places. You can initialize with methods, you can initialize with constructor, you can initialize with methods. But since there is only one copy of it, we always see to that it is initialized in hard coding or static block, because it's only one copy. Okay, so static int I is equal to 5. Yes, but it is able to be modified now. I can modify it now. I can use it now. SOP A.I it will work. What is the big thing about this? See A.I can use it, or I can create the object and use it. No issues. I can use like this or like this. But it is eligible for modification, yes or no? 5 can be modified to what? 55. I do not want this to happen. So to stop modification, what will I do? Final. That's it. Now you cannot modify. This is one way how you can use final with static. Now there will be only one copy, and it is not, you cannot modify it. So generally we say in Java, static final variables are called as constants. So if you want constants, go for what? Static final variables. Why it is called as constant? It cannot be modified, and there is only one copy now. So if you want to declare a constant, you can go with static final variables. Are you clear with this? Okay, so see again, once initialized it cannot be, you can initialize it in hard coding. What are the different ways you can initialize? One more way you can initialize it is in the static block, but either in one place, either in declaration or here you do. I is equal to 5 you write. That's your wish, but don't do it at both the locations. But if you don't do it here, it is called as what? Blank static final variable. Blank static final variable. So if it is a blank variable, means when it comes into existence, it will be blank. As soon as the class is loaded, it will come into existence, but the value of that will be blank. That's why they call it as blank variable. Instance variables also, when they come into existence, if you are not initialized while hard coding, they'll be blank. Later on, they'll be initialized either in the instance block or in constructor. Same as this also, when the class is loaded, I will come into existence, but the value will be blank. When the static block gets executed, it will be initialized. So that's why they call it as blank final variable. And once initialized, it cannot be modified. That's it. These are the only two places you can initialize a static variable. You cannot initialize a static variable where? In an instance block like this, or you cannot initialize it in a constructor like this, or you cannot initialize it. No, this is wrong. We cannot initialize here. This is one place where you can initialize. Where? Hard coding and static block. You can initialize one in assign during declaration. Hard coding, simple. Hard coding. Or second one is in static block. These are the two places where you can initialize your static final variables. When do you prefer a block? You prefer a block when the variable is blank. Blank final variable, that time you go for block. Understood? Sorry, clear this, but you cannot do it where? In instance block, ruled out. In instance block, you cannot initialize a static final variable. You cannot initialize it in constructor. Similarly, you cannot initialize it in what? Method also. This is also wrong. Constructor also wrong. I have not written a method here, but just understand. In method also it will be wrong. And outside also you can't initialize. A.I also you can't initialize. There also it is not able to be modified. A final variable declared once cannot be modified. A final variable declared once cannot be modified. That's it. It can be static or it can be instance. Clear this now? So now let's apply the four things now. It can be initialized once. Yes or no? Either while declaring or in static block. Next one. Once initialized, they cannot be reinitialized or modified. Yes or no? Once it is initialized, you cannot modify it. You initialize with hard coding. Try to change it like this. Not possible. You initialize with hard coding. Try to change it there. Not possible. Means once initialized, it cannot be modified. Third, restricted way of initializing. Yes, correct. Where and all you can initialize? Either with hard coding or in static block. Then finally, variables do not have default values. You don't initialize it. Try to compile, it gives you error. They do not have default values. Understood? They do not have default values. Clear this? So let's see the output of this. Shall I clear everything? Final static variable. So I can have a class A. So now see static int I. So that's it. I'm just declaring it. Let's try to compile. What is it? Error. Because it's a blank. Sorry, this will compile. I not declare it as final. It will compile. But once I declare it as final, it will not compile. It says it might not have been initialized. And these variables are only called as blank final variables. Blank variables means when you are declaring, you are not initializing it. Why they are called as blank? Because when they come into existence, they do not have default values. They have blank values. Okay. Now when will it be initialized? Yes, one way of initializing it is hard coding. One way of initializing is hard coding like this. Is equal to 10. I can access directly a dot I. Directly you can access it because it's static. Value of I is okay, fine. See, this will work. I can initialize it here. Okay. But if I am not initializing it here, I can initialize it in only one location, which is that static block. But you have to hard code. You don't. I don't know which value you can give. Means any value you want you can give now. It's up to you. But you can't send values. It's hard coded value again. So again it will be 10. But anyway, see, you can initialize either here or you can initialize it in static block. But if you don't initialize it here, this is called as blank variable. Understood? So one way of initializing is what? Hard coding. Understood? Hard coding you can initialize. Other way is you can initialize it in static block. But you cannot initialize it in what? Constructor. See, the same I'll try to do it in a constructor. Okay, before I move to constructor, see, if you try to initialize it twice, it will give me error. Yes or no? And remove this. It will give me error. I is 10. Means you already initialized I. Again, try to initialize it. You try to initialize here also, it will not allow you. A dot I is equal to 5. It will give you error. Here also it will give you error. There also it will give you error. So initialize it only once. See, again error. Understood? So A dot I it is, sorry. It cannot be assigned. Fine. Check it out. Same like instance only. That's why one variable you work hard. The second variables become very easy. You cannot initialize it in what? Constructor. You cannot initialize the final static variable in a constructor. This is error. See this, it gives me compilation error. It's already, one second. I'm not initializing there. I have to pass a value here. No, but it will not compile only. Forget creating object. If compilation is successful, then all that is okay. But you cannot initialize, cannot assign a value to final variable I. Where in line number 11? Where is line number 11? In constructor. Similarly, I cannot do it in a method. This is also error. So I'll comment this constructor Now I'll try to do it with a method. This also is not possible. Understood? So static variables can be initialized only in while declaration or in static block. Understood? In technically they are called as which one? The static block, instance block, they are called as initializers. Technically they are called as initializer. So a blank final instance variable can be initialized in instance block and constructor, but they are called as initializer. Similarly, a blank static final variable can be initialized in the static block. Static block is also one more place you can initialize, that's also called as an initializer. So the initializer for static final variable is static block, the initializer for instance final variable is instance block and constructor. That's it. Clear? So these two are over. Now we have to say it with what? Parameters. I'll show with local variables, then I'll go with parameters. Local variables I'll directly type and show it here itself. Just see this. Class final local variable demo. Class A, I'll have one method void m1. You can declare a local variable like this, yes or no? So when you declare a local variable, you will not get any error when you compile. See this. So when you declare a local variable, you will not get an error when you compile. But if you try to use the local variable without initializing it, then you get error, yes or no? I'm trying to use it. I'm trying to use what? Just trying to print it. Forget this hello world and all. Just I'm trying to compile what? A. So local variables should be initialized always. Compiler checks. Understood? It is mandatory. So what value initialize for? See, for instance variables and static variables, if you don't initialize, no error. Because when they come into existence, they take default value. But local variable, if you try to use it without initializing, you get error. So it's mandatory for local variables to be initialized before you use it. So, but see this. Now this will work. It will print me 0. Understood? And it will execute also. Okay, I'm not calling the method. I just call the method. I didn't call the method also. Yeah, it is working. But see, I will not use it. Now it will not force me to initialize it. See this, it will compile but. Why it will compile, A.M1 it's not executing anything, fine. But if I want, I can initialize it later. Next line somewhere, I can initialize it. And then you can use it. So local variables, this is the behavior actually. You can initialize it as soon as you declare it, or you can initialize it later also. But only after initializing you can use the local variable. Now this also works, no issue. But final variable is not like that. See this. So final variables always force the developer to initialize. Let it be static, let it be instance, let it be local also. Okay, I initialized it here. See now. Oh, this is okay, fine, working. Fine. But it will compile, yes, but when you start using it, it gives you error. So what you do, you are forced to initialize it. Now where will you initialize this, which one? Local variable. The same way, either hard coding, that means there itself, but you have to initialize it in a method itself. The only place where you can initialize a local variable is, final local variable is method, no other place. For instance variable you have multiple places, for static variables you have multiple places, but for local variable you have to initialize it there itself. Why? Scope, no? Scope. Outside the scope you cannot use that only, so you are forced to initialize it there. So you can initialize it either by hard coding like this or later with an assignment operator like this. But it will override, no, it will not be able to modify. Either one, either this, while declaring only you initialize it, or later you initialize it. But either one, no, both it will not allow you. So it will give you error. You cannot assign. See, first it is, sorry, I'm not calling, I'm not printing it. I'm compiling, now it executes. Value of I is 10. Okay. But if I'm not initializing it here, fine, I can initialize it where? You are forced to initialize but I can initialize it down also, but it will print 2 and it is final. But once I initialize it here, again I can't initialize it because it is already initialized to 2. Understood? So this is called as blank variable. This is blank. The blank local variable should be initialized where? Inside the method itself. Blank local variable should be initialized inside the method itself. But once initialized, it cannot be modified. Once initialized, it cannot be modified. But if it is a plain local variable, it is eligible for modification. See, first it will print what? 10. Then it will print what? 2. This is able to be modified. So if you want to, if you see here 10 and 2, but if you want to stop the modification of a local variable, make it as final. That's it. Yeah. If you want to stop the modification of a local variable, make it as final. Later on, it cannot be modified. Not only like this. Sometimes you'll be having variables. See this. Like it might happen like this. Int a is equal to 5. Int b is equal to 8. I is equal to a plus p. This also will not work. You cannot modify the value in it. This is also error because you already initialized it. But leave here, you remove here. There you can initialize, correct? But what will be the value of 5? What is the error now? Okay, I'm trying to use it here. Yes. And now the value of 5 will be 13 fixed. That's it, because it's initialized by providing the addition value. Okay. But once initialized, again you cannot modify it. That's it. So be careful to initialize it only once. Then something like, say, even you cannot use post increment and which one? All this is also not possible. You cannot modify it, man. I'm just trying to show you many examples there. You cannot mod. Once it is declared, I cannot say I plus plus also. Post increment, pre increment also you can't use. Nothing you can use. It is not subject to modification. You try to assign a new value directly giving, it will not allow. You try to do some operation and try to give the value, it will not allow. You try to use some increment operator, decrement operator, it will not allow. Once the value is given for a local variable, it is over. It cannot be modified. Clear? Now last we'll go with what? Parameters. Parameters I'll show you here itself. Void m2. Final with parameter now, int I or int something, I'll take p. See, once I get the value of p, it can be anything, but I can modify it now. Value of p is first. See, let's print the value first. Value of p is plus p. Let's print the value first. A is equal to new a dot m2. I'll send the value 5. Again, I'll send a dot m2. First, we'll work with one method. A dot m2 5. So now I call the method. Sorry, we have to remove all this. We'll not call m1. Okay, that's it. Okay, we are not calling m1 method now. See, we are calling only m2. The value of p is 5 it tells. But p value can be modified now. What all ways you can modify p value? P plus plus, correct? Or I can say, first we'll try this. P plus plus. I'm trying to modify it and then I'll try to print it. It will not allow me. Not allowed. P plus plus. No, it is not final now. Okay, I can modify now. It's still not final. I can modify it. First it prints me 5, then it prints me 6. But you can modify it. Not only like that, you can modify it like this also. See here. There it will be 6. Now later on, here if I try to add and print, what will be the value of p? 13. So it goes on modifying. Various changes will happen. But if you don't want this to happen, a plus b. If you do not want to, okay, I have to declare it as p. Okay, but p goes on modifying. Once 5, once 6, 13, the parameter value is getting modified. But if you do not want this to happen, make it as final. Now here also it is error. You cannot modify. Yes or no? What value comes, that is final. If I send 3, 3, that's it. Use it. Okay, I cannot do addition also. Nothing I can do. All will give me error. Just check. It will work now. Value of p everywhere it prints what? 5, 5, 5. But by chance if I say p plus plus, here also error. you cannot modify it because it is final. Not only there, I'll try to do addition. Understood? Here also it gives me error. So you cannot modify it like this. You cannot modify a final parameter at any cost. Simple as that. Are you clear? Any questions here? But see, every time I send a dot m2, this time I'm sending what value? 7. Fine. In the first execution, P will have what? 5 value. Method completes execution. Again I'm calling m2 method. But again it will get what? 7 value. It will execute. But it's not getting modified. What value comes? Till the method completes execution, it will be using the same value. Till the method completes execution, it will be having the same value. Are you clear with this? See, once it is 5, once it is 7. Don't think always P will have a fixed value. The value of P in a parameter will depend on the argument. The value of P in the method will depend on the argument. What value you send in the argument, P will get that particular value. Once P gets the value, it cannot be modified. Clear? So we have seen primitive variable as what? Static, instance, local, parameter. Now we have to see it with what? Reference variable. Now we have to see it with reference variable. Clear? Shall I clear this? We'll see it with reference. This is very interesting with reference variable. But all the rules are applied now. Let it be anywhere. Yes, you have a doubt? Final static method. Means can static methods be declared as final? The question is what? Your doubt is, can static method be declared as final? I think you can declare it because static methods cannot be overridden. They belong to class. His question is, can I what is that? Can I use, his question is, can I use final with static? Okay, can I use final with static? Let's check it out. Can I use final with static? But anyway, see, final is used for stopping overriding. First understand the point. Final is used for stopping overriding. Okay, static methods cannot be overridden. Now if you use final with static or not, doesn't make any difference because anyway you cannot override it only. Final is basically used with a method to stop overriding. Let's try it out. Okay, because I have not tried. I didn't get this doubt. Understood? So if you want, we'll try it out with a simple program. If you apply your basics correctly, all these answers you will get. First you should understand the behavior of final with method. First you have to understand the behavior of final with method. Then you can think about doing permutation and combination. But anyway, I'll just show it to you. Yeah, first I'll make this as static. First we'll see with one method, static void m1. Now first of all, static methods cannot be overridden. There's no necessity of making it as final. Static methods cannot be overridden. What is the use of making it final? Let's check whether it works, but still. Compiles, I think it will work. It will execute also. This method got executed. But now let's have class B. The static B M1 method. First let's try to compile this. Correct now, overriding now? Cannot override. It's okay. But basically what you have to understand, it is giving you compilation error. It's stopping you it. Okay. Basic thing is what you have to understand, it gives you compilation error. the thing is, you see, if I say AA is equal, it's stopping. It feels like you're stopping overriding. You feel it is stopping overriding. But first of all, static methods cannot be overridden. But sometimes what will happen now? You want a static method here, but you want one more static method here with the same name. There will be requirement. You're having one static method here, but you want one more method with the same name here. But again, you can change logic here. You can change logic or add logic, do anything. But the thing is, you might have, but this method belongs to class B only, that belongs to class A only. It will not help you in dynamic polymorphism. It will not help you in dynamic polymorphism. Means A dot M1 it will work, sir. Okay, see A is equal to new A B is equal to new B. Now see this. A dot M1 it will execute from class A, we know that. B dot M1 it will execute from class B only, we know that. Understood? So it will execute now. Inside A M1, inside B method, it will execute both of them. Inside A, it will execute that, no issue. But check out in dynamic polymorphism. Here it will not get any doubt. You will feel okay, it is like overriding. But A is equal to new B. Here you see A dot M1 will be picking from the class, not from the object. Even though I created a B object, the method got executed from A. But if you make it as final, it will not allow you to override. It feels like it's stopping overriding, but first of all, you feel like that. But first of all, static methods only cannot be overridden. When you look at the code, you feel like that. Understood? Are you clear with this? Okay, fine. Anyway, if it is static, we don't override, man. As simple as that. Yeah, these are the core Java questions when we get. In fact, when we start writing big applications, their questions will come out. When will I make my method as static? When will I go for static block? When will I write the code in a constructor? When you write applications, these are the prime questions which come out. So to work in applications, big projects, these are the basic questions you'll be getting. So that's why work hard here itself. So when you start typing an application, this kind of doubt should not come there. Understood? Yeah? Okay. Now, final with static method also is over. We saw final with instance methods. Yes or no? We cannot override. That you should have asked me this question long back. Fine. This question, I have shown you final with methods, instance methods. Now the question is with final with static methods. That also I have cleared it for you. Fine. Next, final with what? Reference variables. This one you have to see. Final with reference variable. Again, your reference variable can be used as what? Static, instance, everywhere you can use. So let's see. Assuming that I am having class box. Assuming that I am having class box fully ready. Class box, int w, int h, int d. You are having one constructor. So this is one user defined data type now, correct? Huh? Int volume. You can write on class, simple class like this. After writing int volume, you can calculate the volume. Int p is equal to w into h into d. Return p. So this is your user defined data type, very simple data type. Now this data type, I want to use it as an instance variable in class box. Yes or no? First of all, has a relation. Has a relation. So I can say box b, valid or not. But it's an instance variable. B is an instance variable of type box. But b is what type of variable? Is it primitive? See, if I have my variable as int x here. X is a variable of type int, but it is primitive variable. But this time I'm saying box b. It's an instance variable, but of type reference. Final variables can be of two types, primitive and reference. This is what I'm trying to explain now. But we are saying reference variable as instance first. Then I'll go with static. Understood? Or we'll go with static only first, which will be much easier because you can initialize it only two places. So I'll write final static box b. Now what happens? B has to be initialized where? Only in two places, either with hard coding or with static block. That's it. Only two places you can initialize. So how will you initialize now? Yes, you have to give a reference value to this now. Yes or no? You have to give a reference value. For primitive variables you give what value? Primitive values. For reference variables you have to give what? Reference value. By chance if you don't initialize it here, this is called as what? Blank final variable. By chance if you don't give the value. And that you have to initialize where now? In static block. These are the only two places you can initialize. How will you initialize? B is equal to new box of 1, 2, 3. Only two places. That's it. Either while declaring or while in the static block. That's it. And now let's see how to work with this. Class demo. PSVM. See this. Hello.b. I'm accessing the static variable now. By chance I'm doing hard coding. By chance I'm doing hard coding where I'm initializing it while declaring itself. So it will print the address. So as soon as the class is loaded, B is ready initialized. How it will be initialized? An object will be created and this B variable will be referring to that object. That's it. It will print the address. Understood? If you want, I can access. Okay. Then if I do not hard code, still hello.b will be initialized. Why? As soon as the class is loaded, variable is declared, but it is blank. If I don't hard code it, it will be blank. Then immediately the static block gets executed, it will be initialized. What will be initialized with? Reference value. Still it will work. But the difference is very minute. Either it will be initialized during declaration or it will be initialized during static block execution. And once it is initialized, it will print the address now. Okay, B will be referring to an object. W, H and D means the object of box is created. The object of box will be created. How the object of box is created, you know. The constructor will be called. Yes or no? So W and H will be initialized to what? 1, 2, 3. It will have the volume method. All this flow you know now. Address will be 150. Correct? So when you say hello.b here, so hello class is getting loaded. So as soon as the hello class is getting loaded, the B object is first created. The address of B is given to that variable now. Which one? B. It might be 150. And WH and D is initialized. Hello.b will print the address. SOP hello.b dot. W will print me 1. SOP hello dot B dot. H is printing 2. SOP hello dot B dot. D is printing me 3. So it prints me 1, 2, 3. But by chance, if I want to modify hello.b is equal to null, error. You are trying to give what value now? Null value. You cannot modify. Or I can say, I am trying to modify the value of b. This is hello class. This is class hello. Hello.b I am trying to modify. No, it will not allow you. Hello.b is equal to new box of 5, 6, 7. I am trying to give a new reference value. You cannot modify. But, shall I clear this now? This is clear for you now. Same rules be applied even for what? Reference variables. But I can modify hello.b.w is equal to 55. Hello.b.h is equal to 66. Hello.b.d is equal to 77. I modify wh and d, but I cannot modify the value of b here. Clear this? Yes or no? This is why I told you be comfortable with primitive variables. In primitive variables what happens? You cannot, see I cannot modify the value of x now. If this is final, can I modify the x value of x? No. Similarly you cannot modify the value of b. But difference is this is primitive value, this is reference value. That's all. So what are the different reference values you can give? A new object value I can give, or I can give a null value. You cannot modify. As simple as that. Clear? And you can initialize it either while declaring or while in the static block. Okay, but you cannot modify value of b. The variable, final variable you can't modify, but wh and d you can modify. If you want to stop the modification of wh and d also, make them also as final here. As simple as that. Clear this? If you understand this one, instance variable will be same simple now. Shall I show you this now? Instance variable directly I'll code and show. If it is instance variable, where will you initialize? Okay, first we'll finish this. I'll clear this. And now B will be referring to only one object. B will be referring to only one object. Understood? And it is static. The life of the static variable is very vast. Till your JVM shuts down, this B object will be alive. Understood? Till your JVM shuts down. Static variables have a very long life. Remember that. Same is the concept of what? Can you see the practical implementation of this? Can you guess? I'll tell you where it is practically applied. First you see this output. Reference variable static demo. I'll use reference variable as what? Static, and then show you the demo. See, with variables you can do plenty of examples. Now class box is required now. What will I do? I'll copy from before only. Open some previous file. We will see with constructor. Take any class, that's your issue. You can class test anything. This is the class ready now. So this class I'll use it as what? Class hello. I'll make this as static variable. Valid now? Yes? Now how do I use it? Now let's see. Value of B is, it will print what? Done? Value of okay, hello.b at. So it will print me null checkout. B is declared and initialized to null. Okay, because it's still static. If I want, I can make it as final. Now very interesting. It will not compile. It says initialize it. Same rules. So what is the value I'll give now? See, my intention was to teach you actually this, but to make this, to give you a very concrete platform here, I thought you which are primitive variables. So there you work. So is equal to new box of what? 1, 2, 3. I can give only reference value to this. Yes or no? So fine. Compiles, executes. See the address value of B is. Okay. Now, apart from that, I can say hello h1 is equal to new hello also. Fine. And still I can print what? h1.b. From wherever you print, the address will be what? Same. You create B h2 object, it will be same. But fine, that is okay. But I want to print the value of what? Okay, I'll try to modify. After showing you this, I'll try to modify now. How will I try to modify? Hello dot B is equal to null. I'm trying to modify now. Yes or no? I'm trying to give null value. No, you cannot do. Or I can say what? No, you cannot modify. You cannot assign. Sorry, I'm telling what? Hello.b is equal to new box. New box, not hello. New box of. See, for B, I'm initializing the reference of box object. That's it. New box. Still error. Cannot assign. So this it will not allow you. So, but fine. But I can. Let's see this first. Value of W in B. H in B. D in B is. So what it will print? B dot W, B dot H, B dot D. Fine. If you want, you try with what? H1 also, that's your wish. But what I'll do, after printing this, I'll try to modify. See this, hello dot b dot w is equal to 11. H D. I'll change it to 11, 12, 13, and then I'll try to print everything again. Will the value change or not? Address will be same, but the values in B object would have been modified. See, address will be same, remember that. Address will be same, but the b.wh initially it will be what? 1, 2, 3, but later on it will be modified to 11, 12, 13. Are you clear? This is only you have to be very careful. Understood? Are you clear this? So you can modify the values inside B object, but not B. B cannot be modified. It is final. Clear? Now where and all you can initialize B now? Either while hard coding or other option where you can initialize is in the static block. Yes, both are correct. Same result. P is equal to new box of I will write static block. Fine? Okay, same result. Then if I make it as instance now, in no other place you can initialize B now, only these two. This is blank final variable. Blank final variable, static final variable can be initialized only in static block. Fine. Let's go with instance straight away. Now box P is what? Okay, I'll come back to instance. See, one of the practical implementation of this is, system class system, built-in libraries. You should start understanding when I teach you libraries now. There's one class called as print stream. There's one more built-in class. There's a class by name print stream. And there are two methods inside this, print and println, which I have told you long back. But still more clarity you'll get now. Also understand this Java topic clearly. It's a variable of type what? They have declared, print stream has been declared as what? The variable name they have declared is it is of type out. On top of that they have made it as final and static is equal to new print stream or something. Leave that. They'll create the object and do this. Leave this part. But now always you can call what? System dot out dot println. I can work with the method like how you are working here. Box is hello dot b dot w, hello dot b dot volume. Call the same as system dot out dot println you can call. But out is final. You try to modify, it will not allow you. Because if you change it off now, nobody can print in the program now. So these are some of the practical implementations. I told you, library is important. To understand library, the basic of core Java is important. This is one of the practical implementation of how they do it. System dot. Anyway, I'll be which one? Telling you about the library. Okay, in class demo you use like this now. In class demo, how do you use? System dot out dot. You try it out, it will not happen because it is final. Yeah. Okay. Now we'll see reference variable as what? Instance variable. That is a practical implementation. Same class hello, we'll be having box P as instance variable, but it is final this time. So now what happens? See, this is the same thing, system dot out dot println. You're telling now, you're calling hello println method, but it is there in out object, but out is an object of type print stream. This is how you go on accessing. I'll explain this statement to you later. Don't worry, leave it, because that I'll be explaining when I'm doing input output packages. System means print stream comes in the IO package. I'll be explaining you all that there. I'll leave it. So now see this. This is the story. So now it has to be initialized where? Either in hard coding now. or you can initialize it in instance block. B is equal to new box of, either way, either there or here, means don't give different, any value you give, that's your wish. Or you can initialize it in constructor. Understood? Can you try this out? You'll get doubt, I know, but you work. Understood? But it has to be initialized only in 3 locations. So hello H, if you do it with hard coding, if you do it with the first way, hard coding, hello object will be created. In hello object, what will be there? B variable will be there. This will be referring to one box object, and the values here will be 1, 2, 3. If you are hard coding, okay, and I can work with H dot B. This is the way I can work. I cannot modify what? B. This is error. H dot B is equal to new box is also error. You can check with addresses. That all you check. Then yeah, if you are hard coding, if you do not hard code, when the variable is declared, it will be blank. When the instance block gets executed, it will be initialized. But almost all same process. Again, if you don't initialize in instance block, it will get initialized in constructor, almost all same flow. You want me to type and show? You can do it now. Doubts you'll get, you manage now. You are supposed to manage doubts now. Understood? Are you clear with all this? But I'll show you with parameter. I'll show you with parameter and which one? Local. Local variable almost all same. It cannot refer. Same with which one? Parameter also. See this, I'll show you in parameter. Shall I clear this? Okay, supposingly there is a class called as hello. I'll remove this. So let's see in parameter now, straight away. Generally in parameter, see, this is the most important thing now. This is very, very important. In projects we do this. In M1 method, you'll be sending user defined data type as arguments now. You will be sending. I'll show you how to send user defined data types as arguments. Return type is void. But once you get B, I can use B, SOP B, SOP B.W, all that I can do. But I can say B is equal to null, no? I can say B is equal to new box. I can make it to refer to another object, no? You'll be giving me a reference. I'll make this as B. Okay. So I can change. But if you do not want all this to happen, what should you do? As simple as this. So throughout your method, till your method completes execution, B will be referring to the same object. It is guaranteed that B will be referring to the same object. Values in the object can be modified, but B cannot be made to refer to another object. You cannot change the value of B. That is important for us. Understood? So definitely we'll make this as what now? Final box B. Now see here, what will I do? So this is your method now. So I'll create an object here, box Z is equal to new box of 1, 2, 3. I have created an object of Z. So it means box type box, but the variable name is what? Z. So the values of WH and D will be what? 1, 2, 3. You know the constructor execution, all that you leave now. But object has been created, address is 150. Then I'll create, look at the code now. Hello, H is equal to new hello. H dot M1, I'll send Z as an argument. So which object has got created now? This is M1 method, box Z, yes? So I'll send the reference value. Now Z is referring to which object? When you send H.M1, this is H object now, address might be 250. This is 150. So call by reference now, when you send the user defined data, what happens? Call by reference. So here, SOP Z, it will print the address, you know that very well. Okay, SOP Z.W, you can access the value, very well you know that. Z.W, Z.H, all this. But the risk here is, you can access all that. But the risk here what we might face is Z is equal to null. Now see, what a dangerous thing. If you make it as final, this can be eliminated. So now you can, Z is equal to null means Z will refer to which object now? Null. It's not referring to that. Or you can say Z is equal to new, you can change 5, 6, 7. Now it will refer to which one? Another object of WH and D where the values are 5, 6, 7. If you don't want all this to happen, make your box as final. Means declare your variable as in M1 method final. That's it. So all this will become what? Error. Here it becomes very important. Understood now? This is very crucial in programming. So most of the times in your methods, your parameters will be declared as final. Parameters mandatory. Understood? Because anybody can modify the value inside your method, so that should not happen. You'll make it as final. This is mandatory. Learn, practice this a lot. This is actually what is required. So to reach to this stage, I have to go in that way, all that long way, from primitive to static to reference to parameter to local and then summarizing. This is the one which is actually required in programming. Clear? We'll be using this extensively. The parameters will be definitely made as what? Final. Static variables will be made final. I'm telling you, the two places where we programmers use final extensively are one with static variables, other one with parameters. These are two places where developers use extensively. Final will be used extensively at two places. One with static variables. Now static variables can be again what? Primitive or reference. I'm not telling that. Again, second place where you'll be using it is parameters. These are the two places where developers use final extensively. Practice this a lot. Practice with both. Which one? Primitive also you practice, reference also you practice. That's why I made you too much work. Even the parameters, look, primitive variables I showed you a lot now. That's why. Understood? This too we make it extensively. Can you work with this now? You understand now? You try with this then. Clear? So this completes what? Final keyword. This completes final keyword. Shall I clear everything? If you want, I'll type and show, but I think you can manage this because I've shown you call by reference. If you're good in call by reference, this is very simple. That's why I'm telling you work on call by reference a lot. Okay. But in fact, you should have the ability to code by now. And now some notes on final variable we'll see. And that puts the end of final now. Final with variables only is very important. Class and method is very simple. A final variable, look at the first point. A final variable may only be assigned a value only once and cannot be modified or reinitialized later. Got it? First point, it can be initialized once but cannot be modified later. Second point, any primitive or reference variable means what are the two types of primitive and reference? Static, instance, local or parameter can be declared as final. Any primitive or any variable which is primitive and reference can be made as final. Next, it will not have a default value. It will only have a blank value. What is that blank value? You don't know. That's why they are called as final blank variables. But you should be initializing it immediately. Okay. A final variable will not have a default value and has to be initialized explicitly. If the variable is not initialized, then you get a compilation. Wherever you want to initialize, but only in the specified locations. Depending on the type of variable, there are specific locations. Only there you have to initialize. Otherwise, you'll get a compilation error. Next, a variable can be initialized only once, either with an assignment statement or with an initializer. I am telling. What do you mean by initializer? The initializers are constructor and instance block for instance block or static block for static block. They are called as initializers. Then next, a variable that is declared as final and not initialized is called as blank final variable. You can static variables also can be blank final variable. Instance variables also can be blank final variables. Local variables also can be blank final variables. So if they are blank final variables, yes, you have to initialize them. But where will you initialize? Instance blank final variable initialized in the constructor or instance block. A static blank final variable can be initialized in static block. A local blank final variable can be initialized in the method. That's it. If final is used with a static variable, then it becomes constant. This is one important thing now. Lastly, if a final variable is a reference variable, then it cannot refer to other object, but values in the instance variables of the object can be modified. This I typed and showed you. Okay, but depends now. The reference variable is in which location. I showed you with static. You can try it at other locations. Instance, but try more with parameters. Try more with parameters. Clear? So this completes final keyword. Any questions with final? So you covered plenty of keywords. Okay. Fine then, that's it.